Norman Borlaug was a man who helped people who were suffering from hunger in third world countries by innovating different types of crops. He felt a need to help those who were starving and saved millions of people around the world. Norman Borlaug was born on March 25, 1914, on a farm near Cresco, Iowa. His parents were Henry and Clara Borlaug. They lived in a house with Norman's grandparents, Nels and Emma Borlaug. Norman was very close to his grandfather, Nels. The two would go fishing together, and his grandfather would give Norman advice. He explained to him that it was very important in life to help those who were in need. He said, "Norm boy, your good deeds will be returned in ways you can never imagine." At a very young age, Norman began to work in the fields and care for the livestock. On their farm, they grew corn, oats, and clover. He had a passion for plants. He wanted to know how they grew, and he was curious about the changing of seasons. As a child, he attended a one-room, one-teacher school. All of the classes in school were oriented towards agriculture instead of preparing for college, because most students would go back and work on their family farm after finishing school. When Norman went to high school, he participated in football, baseball, and wrestling. Probably the most influential person during Norman's school years was David Bartelma, Cresco's high school principal and athletic coach. He told Norman, "Give the best that God gave you. If you don't do that, don't bother to compete." He gave Norman a rule to live by. Norman graduated from high school in 1932. His grandfather encouraged him to go on and receive a university education. Norman's friend, George Champlin, who graduated from Cresco, encouraged him to move to Minneapolis with him. While in Minneapolis, he got a job at the university coffee shop. While working there, he met the love of his life, Margaret Gibson. In Minneapolis, he found many people begging for food and money and sleeping on the ground because of the Depression. Norman said, "Back on the farm, despite the Depression, bank failures, and farm foreclosures, we nearly always had plenty of food. But here in the city, where people depend on cash economy, there is both hunger for food and hunger for work." This stayed with him and made him want to help all people who were suffering from starvation. He tried to enroll in the College of Agriculture, but Norman failed the entrance exam. He was offered to enroll at the General College instead. He made good grades, and after 2 quarters of General College, he asked his advisor if he could transfer to the university's College of Agriculture. He was accepted and would major in forestry. To earn money, he took a job at the Forest Experiment Station in Massachusetts during the summer and fall of 1936. During the summer of 1937, he worked for the Idaho National Forest Service. He did very well and was offered a full-time job. Norman and Margaret were married in September of 1937. During the fall, he listened to a lecture by Dr. E.C. Stackman, a plant pathology scientist who studied wheat rust disease. He was a very highly educated scientist. Norman was impressed at what he heard at the lecture and said he would study under Dr. Stackman if ever possible. At the same time, due to budget cuts, his position at the Idaho National Forest would not be funded until the following June. Margaret persuaded him to do postgraduate work at this time. Norman talked to Dr. Stackman and was encouraged to go into plant pathology. He earned his master's degree in 1940. Soon after, in 1941, while working on his dissertation, he had an interview with E.I. DuPont de Nemours and Company. He was offered a job to start a program in working with agricultural chemicals. The company knew that Norman would be perfect for the job because he was educated on wheat and rust. This company uses science and chemistry to create innovative products. He received his PhD the following year. He worked for DuPont for about 2 years when he was approached by Stackman and the Rockefeller Foundation to be the team's plant pathologist to help fight hunger in Mexico. Stackman remembered Norman from class and recalled Norman's interest in wheat and rust. At this time, the world was at war and was in great need of food. Henry A. Wallace, President Franklin D. Roosevelt's vice president and former Secretary of Agriculture, had traveled to Mexico and saw how people were living and saw a shortage of food. The average acre of land in Mexico produced only 10 bushels of corn. He encouraged the Rockefeller Foundation to help. The land in Mexico was lacking nutrients and fertilizer cost too much and was not being used. He noticed that the wheat plants developed a stem rust, which affected the harvest. He made many innovations with wheat. The first was to crossbreed varieties of wheat to make a strain that was resistant to rust. He spent many long hours in the fields working. Another innovation was shuttle breeding. It was a process in which wheat was planted twice each year, one in the summer near Mexico City, and the other in the winter, further north in the irrigation area. The third innovation was to make a short and strong wheat plant instead of tall and slender plant. Yields increased from all of these innovations. In 1960 and 1961, Norman Borlaug saw that all the countries he had visited were in short supply of trained scientists, so he began going to countries and training young scientists. Norman was director of the International Wheat Improvement Program. This program was committed to producing higher yields of grain products in the third world countries. Norman Borlaug was informed in 1970, while in Mexico, that he had been awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. Borlaug was the first person to receive the Nobel Peace Prize for work in food production. There is no award in the Nobel Peace Prize categories for food production or agricultural advancements, so Norman Borlaug proposed the idea of a World Food Prize. Finally, it was created by Norman in 1986 with the help of General Foods. The ceremony takes place in Des Moines, Iowa, annually on or around October 16th. Norman Borlaug received the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 1977. He went to Texas A&M and became the professor of international agriculture, where he taught and inspired students with his accomplishments. He was a very dedicated man who left a lasting legacy on all who knew him. Borlaug received the Congressional Gold Medal in 2006. He is one of the 5 individuals to receive the Nobel Peace Prize, the Presidential Medal of Freedom, and the Congressional Gold Medal. The other 4 people to receive all 3 of these honors were Mother Teresa, Martin Luther King Jr., Nelson Mandela, and Eli Wiesel. Sadly, Norman Borlaug died at age 95 from cancer on September 12, 2009. After his passing, Senator Charles Grassley of Iowa said, "Norm Borlaug never forgot his roots, right here in the cornfields of Iowa, and Iowans will never forget him. He will continue to inspire generations of scientists and farmers to innovate and lift those mired in poverty." Norman Borlaug was a man who innovated crops to improve the world food production. He helped those who were suffering from famine and is credited with saving more lives than any other person. Norman Borlaug, a small-town Iowa farm boy, grew up to leave a lasting legacy on the world.